Ogres, End Times, and even the Age of Sigmar. Here are 7 things Total War Warhammer needs to do next. It's a classic journalistic cliche that in the time it's taken me to write this, 3 new Warhammer games have been released. And whether or not that's true, there's one franchise that stands helm and pauldrons above all the others. No, not that one, the other one. I'm talking about Total War Warhammer. The second game is orcish in its size and density, and will easily sustain us for a few more years. But Creative Assembly promised us a trilogy, giving us the perfect excuse to dream about all the wonderful Warhammer things absent from the first 2 games. And we know it's on the way. In a recent blog post, CA confirmed the game is deep into production, and they dropped some serious hints about the content as well. Prepare for Eastern promises and chaos with a capital C. Here are 9 things Total War Warhammer needs to do next. My first entry is something of a strategy amuse-bouche. It's simply to say, keep doing what you're doing. Even now, years after release, the second Total Warhammer game has received a steady stream of updates with no sign of things slowing down. The most recent update, The Hunter and the Beast, even gave players the option to recruit heroes reminiscent of the Ubersreich 5 from Vermintide. Plus, there's another big update scheduled for the holiday season, or Festtag in the Warhammer parlance. So this entry then is a humble request that CA continues to embrace this level of support for past and future releases, whether it's weaving together that increasingly impressive map or following up prospective games with a rich and regular DLC program. It's something they've got better and better at since Call of the Beastmen from Warhammer 1, and it has to continue for the fanbase to remain happy. And while they're at it, it'd be great if they expanded on the flimsier races already in the game as well, such as Kislev, Tilia and Estalia, and incorporate some of the more complex, nuanced democracy seen in Total War 3 Kingdoms. Entry 2 is an obvious one. A new Warhammer game means an expanded map, and it's pretty obvious CA will be heading east. This will take us into the Dark Lands, a grim, blasted hellscape even by Warhammer standards, swarming with goblins, orcs and hobgoblins. It's also the location of Zarnagrund, the industrialised capital city of the evil Chaos Dwarves. They're a race that has long been absent from official Warhammer army lists, but Creative Assembly has grown more confident at creating factions from scraps of Games Workshop lore. Just look at the Curse of the Vampire Coast DLC for proof. Further east, and we reach the Mountains of Morn, home of the Ogre Kingdoms. The Ogres would be a fantastic jumbo faction to add to the game that would offer a different twist on what we've seen thus far. You can expect monstrous cavalry, grotesque, gluttony-based lore, and mercenary units cosplaying as other factions. Finally, if CA decide to go even further east, we might see other races only glimpsed in Warhammer fiction. Perhaps even the likes of Nippon, the kingdoms of Ind, Grand Cathay, the Snake Men of Kurush, or Arabe. It seems unlikely, but after an undead pirate faction featuring zombie crabs, anything is possible. So far, Creative Assembly has done a great job of representing the mortal forces of chaos. And while there is a demonic prince and the odd shag-off here and there, the broader, more demonic forces of chaos are sadly absent. The third game then is sure to add 4 demonic factions to the mix: the repulsive Nurgle, capricious Tzeentch, alluring and slightly confusing Slaanesh, and Khorne, the Manchester United of ruinous powers. But more than just factions, I'd like to see an expanded take on the temptation of chaos throughout the mortal world, underpinned by a deeper loyalty system, which is something I'll come back to a little bit later on.
Only the strongest will endure.
All these factions would work as hugely varied forces. Nurgle's armies are famously resilient, whereas Slaanesh's are swift and seductive. And while they could certainly fight united under a chaos undivided banner, it also makes sense in the fluff for them to fight each other as well. They are chaotic after all. Suddenly, that previously lightweight list of new factions looks slightly more well-fed, unless you're only interested in playing as humanoid factions. And as I'll talk about in Entry 6, the increasingly irresistible Chaos Alliance would work perfectly with what's likely to be the theme of the third and final game, the complete destruction of the Warhammer world. Before we move on to the big stuff, one of the things I'd like to see more of are short, narratively rich mini-campaigns. Most of us play the single player in Total Warhammer for its grandest moments, those end of all things, fate of the nation style events. But there's room for smaller, more focused campaigns as well. I thought the Call of the Beastmen DLC almost got this right in Eye for an Eye, a tight, personal campaign between Khazrak the One-Eye and his nemesis Boris Toadbringer. Likewise with Belegar Ironhammer's quest to retake Carrick 8 Peaks.
Belegar Ironhammer, I stand defiant.
These mini-campaigns add colour and context to an increasingly unwieldy list of factions, and it's a great way of getting to know what each race stands for. And as it's entirely likely we'll be dealing with some pretty heavy stuff in the third Warhammer game, a few lighter, story-led distractions might be very welcome. Yes, I realise this is me having my brog and eating it, but this is a wish list after all. Total War Three Kingdoms did a fine job of weaving bombastic, larger-than-life characters into a narrative campaign with expanded roles and abilities. They're involved with diplomacy, trade, management, and more. And the defection and loyalty elements from Three Kingdoms could work brilliantly in a Warhammer setting, especially if you add the seductive lure of chaos as a means of constantly undermining your heroes. The relative strength of some factions could be balanced against how susceptible they are to the draw of the ruinous powers, which would be an incredible, characterful thing to be worried about. But more than this, we need to see all the characters missing from the game so far. It's inconceivable we can have the end times without Nagash and his Mortargs, and it'd be nice to see a few named Vermin Lords too, given how big a part the Skaven play in the destruction of the old world. And as well as more characters, let's have a few monsters as well. I'm thinking Mangler Squigs, Stonehorns, Gorgons, Jabberslides, Mutilith Vortex Beasts, and so on. The first Warhammer game gave us a glimpse of Archaon's early forays into the old world, reminiscent of Games Workshop's now retconned Storm of Chaos campaign from 2004. Or, as some fans called it in the immediate aftermath, the light afternoon drizzle of chaos. So the short version is that as scary as Archaon is, he failed at his first attempt to bring about the end times. The third game, however, could show us another, more permanent resolution.
Do not meddle in my destiny!
It makes perfect sense that the final game set in the Warhammer fantasy world should deal with the literal destruction of the planet. Now you might think there's only one way that story can end, but Total War games are amazing at letting us bend and break history. We know what happened in the real-life Crusades, for instance, but that doesn't mean it has to happen like that in our games. So when I play Medieval 2, for example, I always try and change the fortunes of the doomed Byzantine Empire. It could be the same in Total Warhammer. It doesn't have to result in the destruction of the world that was, but the threat of it should always be there. This scenario would gel with a narrative objective focused campaign, and it's also a great fit for a game set to show us the full power and variety of chaos. Because the slightly depressing truth of Warhammer Fantasy is that chaos always wins. And finally, I'm going to end with a controversial one. Once CA is done with the old world, I'd love to see them embrace the Age of Sigmar in future releases. There are a few reasons for this. First of all, we've already had 2 incredible games set in the classic Warhammer Fantasy world, and there's no suggestion the third will be any less impressive. These are easily the most vivid and complete versions of the Warhammer Fantasy world outside of the books. They won't just blink out of existence just because Creative Assembly make an Age of Sigmar game. Unlike the tabletop version, it'll be easy to pop back whenever we want. But more than this, just think about what Creative Assembly could do with such bold and varied units as the ones from Age of Sigmar. Imagine entire fleets of Caradhran, motivated by personal gain, bombarding enemy armies with a relentless Aether shot. Or wave-riding Idoneth Deepkin going all Little Murder Maid on hordes of jittering, hopped-up Gloomspite Gits. Or the exact moment when you decide to drop your Celestant Prime when playing as the Stormcast Eternals. It could be incredible. And then there's the world of AOS itself, or I should say, worlds. It's currently quite hard to pass Games Workshop's vision of vivid and varied planes of existence, all linked by glowing realm gates. But an Age of Sigmar game made by Creative Assembly could help make that amorphous concept more relatable and show us a left-field take on classic fantasy within the same breath. So there you go. Is there anything you want that I've missed as a Warhammer or Total War fan? If so, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to give this video a like if you're excited to see what Creative Assembly do next, and subscribe to the channel and ring the Skaven screaming notification bell so you know when our next video lands.